air, decent meanness. There is nothing of home in the noisy kettle, the fulsome fire. The atmosphere suggests the trail of a ghostly druggist. Dressings and lint on a long lean table. Whom are they for? The patients yawn, or lie as in training for shroud and coffin. A nurse in the corridor scolds and wrangles. It's grim and strange. Far footfalls clank. The bad burn waits with his head unbandaged. My neighbor chokes in the clutch of chloral. Oh, gruesome world! You know, that getting closer and closer to the individual and from the atmosphere, getting closer and closer to the individual and dehumanization of the individual with the bad burn, which is the way the doctors would refer to you, right? If you were a bad burn, it's not George who has a bad burn, it's the bad burn of it. All right, so he's got that dehumanized vision there, and the form that describes exactly what he's talking about. I know, yeah, and that's the bad burn there. It was a very painful treatment, that chloral. The next poem, let's just go on with this. If you're still with me, we have more pictures, there's more and more. They're all Lister at work. The next one goes back to the sonnet form, the waiting. I'm not going to go read the whole thing, but the waiting for the operation. It comes very early in the whole sequence. And he's like, very tense. I don't have a wife, so I don't have to worry about this if I die. 50% of the people in operations in England at the time were dying. The operations were successful, of course. So when he says at the end, here comes the basket, because you were carried. That was the way it went. It was big. So here comes the basket. Thank you, I'm ready. But gentlemen, my porters, life is brittle. You carry Caesar and his fortunes. Steady. I'm not going to go down. I'm not going to go down with no argument. I do want you to see the next one, which is operation. Different form, not a sonnet. Look what happens. Look at I'm going to read it because you've got to hear the beat. We should do this to rap music. Do it, think of that in the background. You are carried in a basket like a carcass from the shambles to the theater, a cockpit where they stretch you on the table. I'm going to stop for a minute. The shambles is the meat market, carcass, theater, the operating theater. He's describing exactly this is going under. So now let's go back to the poem. You are carried in a basket like a carcass from the shambles to the theater, a cockpit where they stretch you on a table. Then they bid you close your eyelids and they mask you with a napkin, and the anesthetic reaches hot and subtle through your being. And you gasp and reel and shudder within a rushing, swaying rapture, while the voices at your elbow fade, receding fainter, farther. Lights about you shower and tumble, and your blood seems crystallizing, edged and vibrant, yet within you, racked in hurry back and forward. Then the lights go fast and furious, and you hear a noise of water, and you wrestle blind and dizzy in an agony of effort, till a sudden lullus accepts you, and you sound in utter darkness, and awaken with a struggle on a hushed, attentive audience. And this may be why here's the hushed attendant. If you had an operation, the operating theater, it was because there was a whole bunch of people watching. It was fun. But the reason I think I picked this sequence and I started exploring what he was doing and why he was doing it was because I may be one of the last people to have experienced this kind of anesthesia, ether, Remember that? Anyone have an ether? And so you go, it's exactly the feeling, except for the snakes that he doesn't describe. All right. Prehistoric, but it is very accurate. And the rhythm that he's choosing that is not poetic is to imitate that experience of losing it totally and coming back. You get very into it, because that coming back is always a big surprise. But notice that in the whole thing it's the second person because there's no me. There is no identity in the patient. He has no being. It's a patient. Skip that one. Oh. You'll be happy to learn that as he recovers and begins to move out of the self, he takes a turn for the nurse. I should say vaudeville. He starts describing the various figures that inhabit the hospital. He starts moving out of the self. At first he describes the nurses. This is very interesting for those of you who are interested in medical history. It's also interesting for in other ways because, because the women he describes, because unlike in most of Victorian poetry, the women are not dead, they're not falling asleep, and they're not fainting, which is, look at the classics of Victorian poetry. They're not there. They're always, the poems are always addressed to a woman. Maybe Ophelia, as she's drowning, maybe, but there's never a live woman. A live woman. So this attitude that's so antithetical to the concept of masculinity in Victorian England is aided by the passive position of the patient. Maybe that's the reason he sees these women as people, because he needs them. This is the time of the beginning of nursing. Exactly, Florence Nightingale, right? And Henley's descriptions emphasize their individuality and variety, creating an identifiable portrait in each son. Although he continues to use the pronoun I through the next poem, the position of the patient slowly diminishes and the speaker becomes a distant I, as in visual, simply observing hospital life. I don't think I can get through all of these, but let's see. This is one that he calls staff nurse old style. Elizabeth Berkeley, the Florence Nightingale of Scotland. This one is a probationer. He writes the poem Lady Probationer to her. And this one is the staff nurse, new stuff. I mean, these are the people. You can see the descriptions in the poems. If you read the poems, and we're not going to read them because I think we have to get well quick. This is too much sickness. But take just the description here. The sweet old roses of her sunken face. Is anyone who? They're there. Trust me. Everything he describes here is in the poem, and is in the picture, is in the portraits. I don't know how I identified them, but you could easily, once you see the pictures of the nurses, you see that the poem is about them. The lady probationer, I'll just read that one. Some 3 or 5 or 7 and 30 years, a Roman nose, a dimpling double chin, dark eyes and shy, but ignorant of sin and yet acquainted, it would seem, with tears. A comely shape, a slim, high-colored hand, graced rather oddly with a signet ring, a bashful air becoming everything, a well-bred silence always at command. Her plain print gown, print cap, and bright steel chairs look out of place on her, and I remain absorbed in her as in a pleasant mystery, quick, skillful, quiet, soft in speech and touch. Do you like nursing? Yes, sir, very much. Somehow I rather think she has a history. You can see where he's going, and we'll continue with that. We'll go back to that. Maybe we'll go back to that later. Oops, there's the. Let me go back to it for a second, because you have, everything about the conversation. Suddenly, someone else has come into the sonnet. Do you like nursing? Yes. That's not Shakespeare. In Shakespeare, you're going to remain forever because I wrote the poem, not because you're in it. So there's something very developing about him in his wellness. It's not just the libido that's coming out. Oh, we go. Because we can get through the next one, which is, I'm not going to read it, but it is the doctor's, the ward examination. The doctors go through the rounds, and he sees them. Of course, according to him, it's a perfect description, but the important thing, here in the ruck anyhow, the ruck is, a rugby huddle. These guys standing around the patient. Right? That's what you see, the ruck. Surging along. Loud stuffers, exquisite students in prigs, whiskers and foreheads, scarf pins and spectacles, hustles the class. And they ring themselves around the first bed, where the chief, that's Lister, his dressers and clerks at attention, bends in inspection already. So shows the ring, seen from behind round the conjurer, doing his pitch in the street. You see the different levels he's addressing. The way he keeps going. It's a long visit. He keeps describing them in this way. This description from the outside. What does it look like? All these doctors talking around the patient, not seeing the patient. Then we get to the last one, last part. Case number one. Case number one. And case number one sits rather pale, with his bedclothes stripped up, showing his foot. Alas, for God's image, swaddled in wet white lint, brilliantly hideous with red. This is after a treatment, and the doctors move away. He's case number one. Now one can see case number one. That, the way you are dehumanized in an examination in the wards. And we should go back to that first picture, but we're not going to do that. He's describing that very carefully, very directly. The professional attitude, the new professional attitude. Remember that this is a time at the beginning of real hospitals. I mean, hospitals where you have professionals like nurses, doctors, who are beginning to get accreditation. Remember that before that there was no accreditation. So this is a new kind of system that he's describing, and that results in the humanization of the patient in some ways. It's not your friendly guy with the bag that's coming to your house. So, now, this removal of the figure of the eye. Oh, here's Lister. And here's the poem about Lister. A sonnet again. We don't need that. I just wanted to show it to you, that whenever he describes an individual, he tries to make it in a sonnet form. Whenever he describes something, an unusual experience, like casualty, a guy who there's nothing to do with him, he's going to die any minute now, you're just going to, the woman next to him is just watching and waiting. Then it doesn't fit into a portrait. Suicide, the guy who tried to kill himself and will eventually succeed. The scrubber, the the people who go beyond what you can paint in a picture, they're the people that don't fit into a sonnet form. They're the ones that you have to make another form, a form for. That was Robert Louis Stevenson, and he did a poem about it. But I'm going to give you just the last poem because you're waiting for the end. Carry Me Out, Discharge, the 28th poem. Obviously from Enter Patient, you have Discharged. And he's using the same phrases that he used at the beginning. Remember, he crept along. Remember, he couldn't walk. He was being led. He couldn't. He followed behind. Now it's carry me out. You know, not that I can walk, but that I can give orders, which is what counts. Carry me out into the wind and the sunshine, into the beautiful world. Oh, the wonder, the spell of the streets, the stature and strength of the horses, the rustle and echo of footfalls, that faint roar and rattle of wheels, a swift tram floats huge on us. Is it a dream? The smell of the mud in my nostrils blows brave like a breath of the sea. As of old, ambulant, undulant drapery, vaguely and strangely provocative, flutters and beckons. Oh, yonder, is it? The gleam of a stocking? Suddenly, a spire, wedged in the mist. Oh, the houses, the long lines of lofty grey houses, cross-hatched with shadow and light. These are the streets. Each is an avenue leading wherever I will. Free, dizzy, hysterical, faint, I sit, and the carriage rolls on with me into the wonderful world. It's not that he's stronger, but that he's got all kinds of phallic symbols in there.
Yeah.
we won't go into now. But you see that he's got his power back. He's still being carried. But the world as it is wonderful. Reality, and that's the point of this whole talk, reality creates a poetry of its own. Henley's rhyming here has charted his way to health. Thank you.